My name is Marcus. I'm 45 years old. If you'd asked anyone who knew me 5 years ago what my life looked like, they'd probably say I was just a regular guy. Divorced dad trying to keep things together for my son, Jack, 19 now. I work a typical 9 to 5, keep a modest apartment, nothing flashy, nothing to brag about. That's the story everyone knows, or at least what I let them believe. But the truth is a lot messier than that. Much messier. The story starts, like many do, with a family dinner. Only this wasn't just any dinner. It was Jack's birthday, a night that was supposed to be about him, about celebration, about family. Instead, it turned into a night that tore me apart in front of everyone I once called family. It was the first time I realized how far things had changed, how much I'd been underestimated, looked down on, and how little anyone actually knew about me. At that dinner, Jack looked me in the eyes and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "At least Mom's new husband isn't a loser like you." My ex-wife, Linda, chimed in, "Finally, someone who can actually provide for this family." Then her family joined in with cruel remarks like, "Why would you even bother showing up?" It was a brutal, humiliating moment, and it came after 10 years of me quietly supporting my son, paying for everything, from school tuition to car payments, phone bills, medical insurance, you name it, all while keeping a low profile about my financial situation. Linda and everyone else thought I was struggling, that I was some deadbeat dad. But what they didn't know, what no one ever bothered to ask, was that I had built a solid life for myself after our divorce. A life where I was far from the man they painted me to be. I didn't yell back that night. I didn't storm out or make a scene. I just finished my meal quietly and left. But the next morning, everything started to change. Jack's car was gone, his school account frozen, his phone disconnected, and his credit cards canceled. That's when I realized I had to take control. I had to stop letting them see me as the loser they wanted me to be. I'm Marcus, and if you only knew the surface of my life, you'd think I'm just another average guy scraping by. But the truth is, I've built something solid. Quietly, carefully, away from the spotlight and prying eyes. That's what made the night of Jack's birthday dinner hit me so hard. It wasn't just the insults or the betrayal from my own son and ex-wife. It was the ignorance, the false narrative everyone believed about me. So, here's the truth no one saw. Linda and I were married for 17 years. Jack was 7 when we got married, and I loved him like my own. During those years, I worked a steady corporate job, doing the daily grind. But I had always been fascinated by technology and startups. When Jack was about 10, I started dabbling in side projects with 2 close friends from college. We developed a simple but powerful software tool for small businesses. Nothing flashy, just smart solutions to everyday problems. Over the years, that project grew beyond our wildest dreams. We caught the attention of a big tech corporation, and at 35, I sold most of my shares for a hefty sum. Enough to change my life forever. But I kept that part hidden. Why? Because I wanted my family to see me as a dependable, steady father, not some flashy entrepreneur or millionaire. I thought that if I showed off, it would create more problems, especially with Linda. During our marriage, Linda never worked. She wanted to be a full-time mom and focus on Jack. I supported her fully. Mortgage, bills, vacations, school tuition, the works. She had access to joint accounts and credit cards for household expenses. But the big money, the investments, those I kept separate. It was a smart move recommended by my financial advisor for liability reasons and peace of mind. So, Linda always knew we were comfortable. She never worried about bills or money, but she never saw the real numbers. She didn't know about the investment accounts growing steadily or the other business holdings I quietly maintained. She only saw what I let her see. When she filed for divorce 3 years ago, claiming I was emotionally distant and that she wanted someone who could give her more, I was devastated. But I didn't fight back aggressively. My lawyer pushed me to be more ruthless, but I chose to keep it civil, for Jack's sake. I agreed to a generous settlement. Linda got the house, a nice monthly alimony, and primary custody of Jack while he was underage. I got weekends, holidays, and paid child support. Pretty standard stuff. But after the dust settled, Linda moved on fast. And that's when Brad came into the picture. Brad is everything I'm not, at least on the surface. Loud, flashy, extroverted. Drives a brand new BMW. Wears expensive suits, and constantly talks about how successful his consulting business is. Linda was smitten immediately. Jack started spending more time at their place and came home with stories about fancy dinners, expensive clothes, and dream vacations. At first, I was just relieved Jack seemed happy. Sure, it stung hearing comparisons. Brad's better car, better clothes, better everything. But I tried to brush it off as teenage drama. Then the comments started. Jack would say things like, "Dad, you should drive a better car if you want to impress people." Or, "Mom says Brad knows how to treat a woman right, not like some people." Brad bragged about buying Jack a gaming setup, telling him, "Money isn't an issue when you're really successful." I bit my tongue. I wanted to be the bigger man. I kept paying for everything I was supposed to: tuition, clothes, car payments. I took Jack on a ski trip to Colorado. Bought him that gaming computer he wanted. But nothing was enough. Linda and Brad got engaged after just 6 months. Their engagement party was extravagant. A country club, live band, the works. Jack couldn't stop raving about how amazing it was. But things with Jack started to change. His attitude toward me shifted. He became dismissive, disrespectful. Rolled his eyes when I picked him up for our weekends. Made snide comments about my house being small compared to the mansion Linda and Brad were looking to buy. Complained about the restaurants I took him to, the clothes I bought him. I tried talking to Linda about it, but she brushed me off. He's growing up, Marcus. Maybe if he made more of an effort to impress him, he wouldn't feel that way. It hurt, but I kept trying. I was still the silent provider in the background, the one who paid for almost everything Jack used or needed. What they didn't realize was that even after the divorce, I kept going above and beyond. I arranged direct payments to the private school, so the money didn't even pass through Linda's hands. I paid the insurance on Jack's BMW, kept the phone and credit cards active on my accounts, controlled the college fund for his freshman year. Even some of the bills Linda thought she was handling were quietly covered by me. I was the one holding the strings, but I was invisible to them. Then came Jack's 18th birthday dinner, the night that changed everything. I never thought a birthday dinner could hurt this much. Jack's 18th birthday was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone marking the transition from boy to man. But that night, it felt like my world was crashing down piece by piece, right there in front of everyone. Linda insisted on having the party at a fancy steakhouse downtown, one of those places where the chandeliers sparkle brighter than the smiles. I wasn't thrilled about the venue, but I wanted to be there for Jack. This was his day. After all, I wanted to show up, even if it meant walking into a den of people who didn't respect me anymore. When I arrived, I noticed the seating arrangement right away. I wasn't next to Jack, the birthday boy, but at the far end of the table, isolated. Brad sat in what used to be my spot, next to Linda, with Jack on his other side. Her parents and sister's family clustered around them, laughing, chatting, clearly in their own little world. And there I was, left out like an afterthought. The night started off okay. We ordered food, made small talk about Jack's upcoming senior year, and I gave him his gift, an expensive watch he had wanted for months. For a brief moment, I thought things might be okay. Jack looked genuinely pleased. Then Brad took over the conversation. Loudly, he began talking about the new house he and Linda were planning to buy. A massive place with 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and a pool. Linda deserves a home that matches her status, Brad announced, making sure everyone could hear. Somewhere that shows she's with a man who can actually provide. I felt my jaw clench, but I stayed quiet. Linda was beaming, hanging on his every word. Brad bragged about the mortgage being no problem because of his consulting business success. "Baby, don't even think about the cost," he said, turning to Linda. "You've been living beneath your means for too long." Then her mother, Carol, chimed in with a smirk. "It's wonderful to see Linda with someone who really appreciates her worth. She deserves the finer things in life." I took a slow sip of my water, trying to focus on my steak, reminding myself this was Jack's night. I wasn't going to make a scene, But then Jack spoke up. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "At least Mom's new husband isn't a loser like you," he said, looking directly at me with a look I can only describe as pure disgust. The table fell silent for a moment. I wanted to say something, anything, but I was paralyzed. Linda didn't scold him. Instead, she smiled and added, "Finally, someone who can actually provide for this family," raising her glass toward Brad. That was when the floodgates opened. Carol leaned forward, smirking. "Marcus, why would you even bother showing up to these things? Seriously, what's the point?" Lisa, Linda's sister, started laughing, actually snorting with amusement. "Oh my God, Mom, stop." But Carol wasn't done. "No, really. Linda moved on to bigger and better things. It's just awkward having you here pretending you're still relevant." Mark, Lisa's husband, emboldened by the group, joined in. "Nothing personal, Marcus, but it's pretty obvious who the upgrade is here." They all laughed. Loud, cruel laughter that echoed in my ears. Even people at nearby tables were staring now. Jack, my own son, looked at me with contempt. "You're pathetic and embarrassing compared to him," he said, pointing toward Brad. "I don't even know why Mom ever married you." Carol nodded approvingly. "Thank God she upgraded. This is what a real man looks like," she said, patting Brad on the shoulder. Brad tried to play humble, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Now, he said with fake modesty. "Let's not be too hard on Marcus. I'm sure he's doing his best with what he's got." More laughter, more snorts, more humiliating comments about how I was a loser, how Linda clearly married up, how it was obvious I couldn't compete. I sat there and took it all in. I finished my steak methodically, chewing slowly, making sure each bite was deliberate. I said nothing, didn't defend myself, didn't storm out. When the dinner finally ended, I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and quietly said, "Happy birthday, Jack. I hope you had a good time." Then I walked out. That night, I went home and started making calls. But I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just cut everything off without a plan. I had to do this legally and carefully. Because here's what none of them knew. Most of what they thought was paid by Linda's divorce settlement was actually still coming from me. That night after the birthday dinner, I sat alone in my dimly lit home office, the silence pressing in around me. The cruel word from Linda, Jack, and their whole circle echoed louder than ever. But beneath the pain, a cold resolve began to take root. You see, what none of them realized or cared to understand was how deeply I'd been involved in Jack's life, financially speaking. Even after the divorce, I had been the silent provider, the hidden backbone of everything they thought they controlled. Jack's private school tuition, paid directly by me, with a special arrangement I made with the school, so the money wouldn't pass through Linda's hands. That was intentional, a way to make sure Jack's education never wavered, no matter how messy our family became. His car, the shiny BMW that Brad flaunted like a trophy, I bought it outright, kept the registration and insurance in my name, and allowed Jack to use it. A privilege, not a right. The cell phone plan, the credit cards, the college fund, all tied to my accounts. Even the health insurance covering his medical, dental, and prescriptions was through my company policy. Some of the bills Linda thought she managed, I quietly paid those too, just to avoid any disruption in Jack's life. I wasn't doing it to win points or get recognition. I just wanted to make sure Jack had what he needed, even if the people around him didn't respect me. But after that night, it was clear. Respect wasn't coming, not from Linda or Jack. And I had to rethink everything. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I laid out the situation, the insults, the public humiliation, and most importantly, the voluntary financial support I was providing beyond my court-ordered obligations. My lawyer confirmed what I suspected. I was legally free to withdraw any additional support beyond the child support and alimony payments mandated by the court. That meant I could stop paying for Jack's private school tuition, the car insurance, credit cards, and more without breaking the law. But the key was to do it properly, with formal written notices and enough time to avoid any legal repercussions or accusations of neglect. It wasn't just about cutting off funds. It was about reclaiming control and setting boundaries. I wasn't going to be the invisible ATM for people who saw me as a joke. First, I sent a formal letter to Jack's school explaining that I would no longer make tuition payments after the current semester, citing changes in family circumstances. I followed the school's official notification procedures to the letter. Next, I gave the insurance company the required 30-day notice to remove Jack from my health policy. I contacted the credit card companies to revoke Jack's authorized user status and requested new cards issued solely in my name. I also requested cancellation of Linda's authorized user privileges on certain cards to prevent misuse. The phone company needed written notice too, so I submitted paperwork to disconnect Jack's line at the end of the billing cycle. The car was trickier, since it was registered in my name, and I paid the insurance. I had legal rights to reclaim it, but my lawyer advised sending a certified letter first, giving Jack 1 week to return the vehicle voluntarily before I arranged for repossession. The college fund was easier since it was in an account I controlled. I simply changed Jack's access effective immediately. Each step felt like pulling strings on a puppet. Suddenly, I was no longer invisible. The people who thought they controlled the narrative were about to see the truth. Over the next few days, I methodically cut off the voluntary financial lifelines. I wasn't just stopping payments. I was sending a message. It wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. And I was done being the punchline. But as the days passed, I started to notice how quickly the world I quietly supported began to crumble. Jack's phone went silent. His car sat unused in the driveway. The school sent notices to Linda, who called me in confusion and panic. Linda, the woman who had so easily dismissed me, suddenly found herself scrambling. And Jack? Well, he was starting to understand that the man he called a loser was the one holding all the cards. I'm Marcus. If you thought my life was simple, think again. Because when the facade starts to crack, everything beneath it rushes to the surface like a tidal wave. After I began cutting off the voluntary financial support, the delicate balance Linda and Jack had relied on shattered almost instantly. It wasn't just money disappearing. It was the illusion of control they thought they had over me, over Jack's life, over everything. The first sign of trouble came with a voicemail from the school's billing office. They were puzzled by the sudden halt in tuition payments and had already started sending overdue notices to Linda's address. I called her, calm but firm, explaining what I was doing. She didn't take it well. What do you mean you're stopping payments? Jack's education is not negotiable, she snapped, her voice tight with frustration. I told her I was only withdrawing the voluntary payments, the ones beyond what the court required. I was still covering child support and alimony, but the extra stuff? That was on her now. You think this is some game? She hissed. You don't get to punish Jack because you're hurt. He didn't ask for this. She was right about one thing. Jack didn't ask for it. But neither did I ask to be humiliated in front of my own son by the woman who once vowed to be my partner. Meanwhile, Jack's world started falling apart too. His phone was disconnected as planned. The credit cards he used for expensive clothes and gadgets were canceled. The BMW he boasted about, sitting idle, uninsured and untouchable. When I sent the certified letter about reclaiming the car, I expected a reaction, but the silence was deafening. I imagined Jack sitting alone, realizing the privileges he took for granted were gone. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, but I had to remind myself this was a lesson. For Jack, for Linda, for everyone who thought I was the weak link. And it wasn't just financial. Linda's family started calling me, trying to persuade me to reconsider. Carol, her mother, was the most persistent. Marcus, this isn't you, she said over the phone. We all want what's best for Jack. I wanted to say, you never cared what was best for me, but I kept my cool. Carol, I said, I'm not doing this to punish Jack. I'm doing this because I refuse to be disrespected anymore. The calls kept coming. Lisa, Linda's sister, tried a different tactic, guilt. Think about Jack's future, she pleaded. He's still your son. I never stopped thinking about that. I replied, but respect is a two-way street. The hardest part was watching Jack change. The boy who once looked up to me, who I thought shared a bond with, was growing distant, angry, and resentful. When I saw him last, he barely met my eyes. He muttered, You don't get it, Dad. Mom and Brad give me everything I want. I wanted to scream, I'm the one paying for everything you have. But instead, I swallowed the anger and said, I'm trying to show you something important, Jack. He shook his head and walked away. The next few weeks were the hardest. Linda started demanding explanations, threats of legal action if I didn't resume the extra payments. Her lawyer sent letters accusing me of neglect, but I had done my homework. Every step I took was legal, documented, and within my rights. Still, the emotional toll was immense. I couldn't help but think back to the early days of our marriage, back when Linda and I dreamed of family, of building a life together, back when Jack was a little boy, innocent and trusting. What had changed? Had the money changed us? Had pride and appearances blinded them to the truth? One night, after a particularly heated call from Linda, I sat down and wrote Jack a letter. I didn't send it immediately. I needed time to figure out if this was the right thing to do. In the letter, I wrote about the sacrifices I'd made quietly, about the sleepless nights working to give him a better future, about the pain of being disrespected by the people I loved most. I told him I hoped one day he'd understand. Days turned into weeks. Jack didn't respond. Linda didn't back down. But I stood firm. I began to realize this was about more than money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about setting boundaries with people who had taken me for granted, about showing my son that respect isn't bought with luxury cars or flashy gifts. It's earned through honesty, through integrity, through standing up when it's hardest. At work, I kept my head down. I focused on building the business I'd started years ago, the one Linda never knew about, the one that had quietly grown into something substantial. I poured my energy into growing that company, knowing that eventually the truth would come out, and when it did, no one would be able to deny who I really was. But for now, the silence at home was deafening. I missed Jack. I missed the son who once called me his hero. I missed the family I once had. But I knew I had to hold the line, because sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence. I never imagined that cutting off financial support would stir such a storm. The ripples I set in motion turned into waves crashing down hard on everything I thought I had. It was during those first few weeks after the birthday dinner and my withdrawal of voluntary support that I truly saw the fractures in my family and in myself widen beyond repair. Linda's relentless phone calls didn't stop. At first, she pleaded, then demanded, then threatened legal action. I stayed calm, following my lawyer's advice to document everything. One evening, I received a call that shook me. Jack had skipped school. No calls, no messages, just gone. I felt a cold wave of panic. I drove straight to Linda's house. When I arrived, the tension was thick. Linda was frantic, pacing the living room. Carol, her mother, hovered anxiously. Where is he? I asked. Linda shook her head, eyes wild. No one knows. His phone's off. He's disappeared. For a moment, I saw the boy I raised, a scared, lost kid struggling with anger, confusion, and betrayal. But I also saw the damage we'd all done. I called Jack's friends, checked local hangouts, and finally found him in a rundown diner on the outskirts of town, staring blankly into a cup of coffee. He looked up and I sat down, surprise flashing in his eyes. Dad, I didn't expect you. I told him I was worried, that he didn't have to run from me. He said, It's not you, it's everything else. Mom, Brad, everyone, I feel like I'm stuck in a story I didn't write. I nodded. I know, and I'm sorry. That moment was a turning point for me. Jack and I began meeting regularly, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, the walls started to come down. But Linda wasn't happy. She saw my growing closeness with Jack as a threat, and the war between us escalated. She ramped up the public humiliation, trying to sway Jack further into her world of flashy appearances and superficial success. One night, after a particularly harsh exchange of family event, Jack snapped at her, saying, You don't know what Dad's done for me. You never did. Linda stared at him, disbelief and anger flashing her eyes. You're just a spoiled kid, she retorted. That was the moment I realized Jack was starting to see through the lies. But the damage was still deep. Brad, meanwhile, played his part perfectly. Smiling, charming, always a successful businessman. But beneath the surface, I suspected cracks. I dug deeper into Brad's background and found discrepancies in his so-called consulting business. It wasn't the empire he claimed. Linda was blinded by the illusion, but I wasn't. I began quietly gathering evidence, financial records, contracts, and testimonies from former clients. At work, my own company was thriving quietly. I had built it from the ground up with relentless focus. It was my sanctuary, but I wanted more. I wanted the truth to come out, not just about Brad, but about me. One day, I invited Jack to the office. He walked into the modest but busy space, eyes wide. "This is where I spent a lot of time," I said, "building something I'm proud of." I showed him financial reports, emails, and the growing client list. "I didn't want you to know because I wanted you to see me, not the money, not the status, but the man." Jack looked at me, a mix of surprise and pride. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said quietly. "I'm sorry too," I replied. We started rebuilding our relationship on honesty. Meanwhile, Linda's world began to unravel as Brad's lies caught up with him. Clients stopped returning calls. Contracts were canceled. The once flashy lifestyle was unsustainable. Linda faced the consequences of her choices, and slowly, she came to me. One cold evening, she sat across from me, eyes tired. "Marcus, I was wrong," she said. "About you, about everything." I looked at her, heart heavy but resolute. "We can't change the past, Linda," I said, "but maybe we can fix the future, for Jack." It wasn't easy. Trust had to be earned again, brick by brick. Jack was watching us both, learning what real strength and forgiveness meant. Through the pain and the chaos, I found clarity. I wasn't the loser they painted me to be. I was a man who stood up, who fought quietly, and who never gave up on his family, even when they pushed him away. The days that followed Linda's reluctant apology were some of the hardest and most important I've ever faced. When you're told you're a failure by the people closest to you, and then given a chance to prove them wrong, the path isn't simple. It's filled with awkward silences, half-truths, and painful confrontations. Linda's words hung heavy between us. She admitted she was wrong, but that didn't mean everything was suddenly okay. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the recognition that she had played a part in the rift between Jack and me. Jack, for his part, was cautiously hopeful. Our conversations grew longer, our silences more comfortable. Slowly, the boy who once scorned me was beginning to see me for who I really was. I invited him to meet some of my closest friends and business partners, people who knew me beyond the family drama. They saw the man behind a quiet exterior, and I wanted Jack to see that too. One evening, Jack and I stayed late at the office, poring over new projects and ideas. I could see a spark in his eyes, a curiosity and respect that I hadn't seen in years. "Dad," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." Those words hit me like a thunderbolt. It was the first real affirmation I'd received from him since the divorce. Meanwhile, Linda was trying to make amends, not just with me and Jack, but with herself. She sought therapy, began volunteering at a local charity, and started distancing herself from Brad, whose facade was crumbling under the weight of his lies. Brad's business collapsed. His creditors came calling. His charm no longer worked on the people who mattered. Linda finally saw the man for who he truly was. She came to me one rainy afternoon, eyes swollen from tears. "Marcus," she whispered, "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. For Jack. For us." I looked at her, the woman I once loved and the mother of my son. The wounds were deep, but not beyond healing. "We'll take it one day at a time," I said. Jack's high school graduation was months away. The event felt like a beacon of hope, a chance to celebrate not just his achievements, but our fragile new beginning. We planned the party together. Linda, Jack, and I, tentatively rebuilding a family in the ruins of what had been. At the ceremony, I stood in the crowd, watching Jack walk across the stage. The pride swelling in my chest was almost unbearable. Later, at the celebration, Linda, and I shared a quiet moment. "I'm sorry," she said again, "for everything." "I know," I replied, "and I forgive you." Jack approached, holding out his diploma. "Thanks for sticking around, Dad," he said. I took it, smiling through the tears. But even as we healed, the past lingered. There were legal battles over the car, the credit cards, and the college fund. Linda's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, but my careful documentation and lawyer's guidance protected me. The truth was coming out, not just about money or status, but about integrity and resilience. I learned that being a father, a man, and a provider meant standing firm, even when it hurt, even when it meant walking through fire alone. The road ahead wasn't smooth. We faced challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, I felt hope because I had reclaimed my dignity, because I had shown my son what real strength looked like, because family, no matter how broken, can be rebuilt with honesty, respect, and love. For years, I carried the weight of silence, hidden fortunes, invisible sacrifices, and quiet resilience. The facade of a broken man had been carefully maintained by those around me. But beneath it all, a different story was unfolding. One of strength, endurance, and a love too stubborn to let go. After Jack's graduation, life seemed to tilt on a new axis. The fragile peace between Linda, Jack, and me was as delicate as glass, but it held promise. Yet, the battle for truth and respect was far from over. The shadows of the past still lingered, waiting to be confronted. The revelations about Brad's fraudulent business dealings became the catalyst that shifted everything. His downfall was swift. Once a symbol of success and power in Linda's eyes, he was reduced to a cautionary tale of greed and deception. Linda, grappling with betrayal, turned to me, not just for comfort, but for partnership in repairing what had been broken. I remember the night she came to my office, eyes swollen from tears, voice trembling but sincere. "Marcus, I was blind. I judge you unfairly, blinded by appearances and empty promises. I want to make things right." Her words were both balm and burden. Forgiveness was a path, not a destination, and the road ahead was steep. Meanwhile, Jack and I grew closer, our bond forged anew through honest conversations and shared struggles. I showed him the company I had built, a modest office filled with hard-working people dedicated to innovation and integrity. No flashy suits or empty boasts, just real work and quiet success. Jack's admiration rekindled a flame of hope inside me. He began to see me not as a defeated figure, but as a man of substance and character. "Dad," he said one afternoon, "I'm proud of who you are." That simple affirmation was worth more than any material wealth. The legal battles, however, tested our resolve. Linda's initial resistance to the withdrawal of my voluntary financial support escalated into heated courtroom confrontations. Her attorneys painted me as vindictive, a man trying to punish a son and ex-wife who had done nothing but move on. But I was prepared. Every letter, every notification, every formal step I had taken was documented meticulously. My lawyer's strategy was airtight. The court recognized my right to discontinue additional support beyond court-mandated obligations. Yet, legal victories fell hollow amid fractured relationships. It became clear that true resolution required more than courtroom success. It demanded reconciliation, a rebuilding of trust and respect. Together, Linda and I attended family therapy sessions. The process was grueling. Old wounds reopened, blame exchanged, tears shed. But slowly, empathy took root. Jack, caught in the crossfire of our fractured family, blossomed as he witnessed our commitment to change. His youthful anger gave way to cautious optimism. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Jack pulled me aside. "Dad, I know we had our problems, but I want to be better. For us." Those words sparked a renewed determination within me. I realized that being a father wasn't about grand gestures or financial support alone. It was about presence, honesty, and unconditional love. As the months passed, our family story transformed. The bitterness that once defined us softened into understanding. Linda and I found a new rhythm, not as lovers, but as partners in parenting and mutual respect. Jack thrived, graduating college with honors and pursuing a career grounded in integrity and passion, a reflection, I hoped, of the values we had fought to restore. Reflecting on the journey, I understood that the true measure of wealth wasn't in bank accounts or flashy possessions, but in the strength to endure, the courage to confront pain, and the humility to seek forgiveness. The man they once mocked was no longer invisible. He was a man who stood tall, not because of what he had, but because of who he was, and in the end, that was worth more than anything. The years following the birthday dinner that shattered the fragile peace in our family were some of the hardest I have ever lived through. The facade I had maintained, the quiet provider, the man who seemed to have little but gave everything, was now cracking under the pressure of resentment, misunderstanding, and hidden truths. When I first began pulling back my voluntary financial support after that humiliating night, it wasn't just a simple cutoff of money. It was a break in illusion that Linda and Jack clung to, a shattering of the false narrative they had built about who I was. But in doing so, I opened a Pandora's box of pain and conflict that would test every fiber of my being. Linda's fury was immediate and relentless. The calls were endless. At first, she begged, then demanded, and eventually threatened legal action. Her words cut deeper than I expected. "How can you do this to Jack?" she cried. "You're his father. He deserves better." I didn't respond in anger. Instead, I reminded her calmly, "I'm still paying all the court-ordered child support and alimony. The rest was voluntary, something I chose to provide out of love and a desire to give Jack a better life." But love was not enough to pierce the wall of bitterness she'd built. Jack's response was far more painful. The boy I raised, the son I'd silently supported through every hardship, began to distance himself. His respect turned to contempt, his trust into suspicion. The son who once looked to me for guidance now dismissed me as irrelevant, a man beneath the shadow of Brad, the flashy new figure in our lives. I still remember the look in his eyes the night he told me, "Mom and Brad give me everything I want. You don't." I swallowed my pride and the sting of his words. I wanted to shout, "I'm the one who pays for your school, your car, your future." But I held my tongue, because I realized then that this battle was never about money to him. It was about identity, status, and where he fit in the fractured puzzle of his family. The weeks that followed were a blur of cold silences and strained conversations. Linda's circle of friends and family had turned against me, emboldening Jack's disrespect and deepening the divide. Yet, beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding, one of quiet resilience and careful strategy. I began the slow process of disentangling myself legally and emotionally. Every letter I sent to the school, every notification to insurance companies, every step taken to revoke credit card privileges was deliberate and documented. My lawyer guided me carefully through the minefield, ensuring that I maintained my rights without crossing legal or moral boundaries. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming my dignity. One afternoon, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, I sat down and wrote a letter to Jack. It was honest and raw. I told him about the sacrifices I'd made quietly, the sleepless nights working to give him opportunities one never had. I told him about the pain of feeling invisible in my own family, about the hope that he would someday understand. Days passed without a response. I wondered if I had pushed him further away, or if the words would someday find their way to his heart. Meanwhile, Linda's world began to unravel. The perfect image she clung to of Brad as a successful, supportive partner was crumbling. I uncovered the truth about Brad's consulting business. It was a facade, a house of cards built on exaggerations and false promises. Clients were disappearing, contracts canceled, and Brad's charm no longer masked his instability. Linda was forced to confront the man she'd chosen over me. It was a bitter reckoning, one that tore the fragile threads holding our family together. Despite everything, I remained a constant for Jack. We started meeting regularly, just the two of us, talking without judgment or anger. Slowly, the boy who had rejected me began to open up. Our conversations grew deeper, filled with memories, hopes, and tentative plans for the future. One night, after a long talk about life's unfairness, Jack looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm sorry for the things I said. I didn't see the full picture." I smiled, a weight lifting from my chest. It's okay, son. We're learning together. The road to rebuilding was long and winding. Linda and I began attending family therapy sessions. It was painful. Old wounds reopened, blame was thrown around, and tears flowed freely. But with each session, we peeled back layers of resentment and misunderstanding. Jack thrived in this new environment. He graduated high school with honors, applied himself with renewed determination. He chose a college nearby, wanted to stay close to home and rebuild what had been broken. I supported him as best I could, no longer just with money but with presence and guidance. Through the turmoil, I learned the true meaning of fatherhood, not as a provider of material things, but as a pillar of strength, honesty, and love. The legal battles eventually faded as Linda acknowledged the legitimacy of my actions. The courts upheld my right to withdraw voluntary support, recognizing my continued commitment to court-ordered obligations. Our family was far from perfect, but we were healing. Jack's graduation from college was a milestone I never dared imagine during those dark days. I stood in the audience, overwhelmed with pride and gratitude. Linda and I shared a quiet moment afterward, a tentative peace between us. "Thank you," she said softly, "for never giving up." I nodded. Family is worth fighting for. Looking back, I realized that the richest legacy I could leave Jack wasn't money or possessions, but the example of resilience and integrity. The man who was once the subject of scorn had risen, not through vengeance or anger, but through quiet strength. And that was a victory far greater than any court ruling or bank balance. The months following Jack's college graduation marked a turning point in all our lives, a moment when years of pain and silence finally began to unravel and transform into something new. What once seemed impossible, the chance to heal the wounds inflicted by pride, resentment, and misunderstanding, was now slowly becoming real. Linda and I had learned to communicate with honesty, leaving behind the bitterness that once poisoned every conversation. The therapy sessions we attended had revealed truths we had both been too afraid to face, exposing vulnerabilities that became bridges rather than barriers. Jack was no longer the distant, angry son who dismissed me as a failure. Instead, he was a young man eager to rebuild his relationship with his father, searching for fatherly guidance he had once rejected. But the past was never far away. Brad's fall from grace had devastated Linda. His lies, his empty promises, and his selfish ambition left her questioning every decision she had made. The lavish lifestyle they had shared was revealed as a facade built on shaky ground, and she struggled to reclaim her identity beyond the shadow of his deception. I stood by her side, not as a husband, but as someone who understood the pain of starting over. One afternoon, Linda came to my office unannounced, her eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that we'll never be the family we wanted to be." I reached out, holding her hand gently. "We're not the family we were. We're something stronger. We're real." That day, we began a new chapter, not defined by what we had lost, but by what we were willing to rebuild. Jack, too, was navigating his own journey. He had enrolled in graduate school, determined to carve out a path that reflected his own values rather than the empty materialism he had been surrounded by. Our late-night talks continued, filled with laughter, regrets, and dreams. I shared with him the story of my quiet business successes, the sacrifices made in silence. He listened, eyes wide with newfound respect. "Dad," he said one night, "you're the strongest man I know." Those words echoed in my heart. Yet, healing was not without setbacks. Linda and I faced moments of doubt, old wounds threatening to reopen during tense disagreements. Jack struggled with forgiveness, sometimes retreating into silence when anger bubbled beneath the surface. But we persevered. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, I sat with Jack on the rooftop of my apartment building. The city lights flickered below us like stars, and the air was thick with possibility. "Dad," he said softly, "thank you for never giving up on me. On us." I smiled, my heart full. I never stopped believing in you. That night, I realized that redemption was not a destination, but a journey, a series of small steps taken with courage and love. Linda, Jack, and I were walking that path together, imperfect but hopeful. The man who once sat alone at a humiliating birthday dinner had reclaimed his dignity. not through wealth or status, but through resilience and the strength to forgive. And in that strength, we found our family again. There's a moment in every life where the past, present, and future stand side by side, and you realize the person you become is the sum of every choice, every heartbreak, every silent triumph. For me, that moment came quietly, not in a courtroom, not at a dinner table crowded with laughter and judgment, but in the simplest of places, my own living room, sitting across from my son, with the rain softly tapping against the windows. Jack was home from graduate school for the weekend. Linda was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of rosemary chicken filling the air, a domestic warmth I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the same as before. It couldn't be, but it was real. And in that authenticity, there was more love than I dared hope. Jack looked older now, his features sharper, his gaze deeper. But when he smiled, I still saw the boy who once ran into my arms after school, his backpack bouncing behind him. "Dad," he said, breaking the quiet, "can I ask you something?" "Really ask?" "Of course," I replied, bracing myself. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" His voice trembled, but there was no accusation, only a genuine desire to understand. About everything. About how well you were doing. About Brad. About Mom. I paused, searching for words that could bridge years of silence. I didn't hide it because I was ashamed. I began slowly. I hid it because I didn't want you to measure me or yourself by numbers in a bank account. I wanted you to see me, Jack. Not the car I drove, the house I lived in, or the investments I made. Just me, your father. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I think I do now. The journey to that moment had been anything but simple. After Brad's world collapsed under its own lies, Linda faced a darkness I wouldn't wish on anyone. Betrayal layered on top of regret. For months, she struggled to forgive herself for believing a man who promised everything and delivered ruin. But there's something about falling so low that forces clarity. Linda began therapy, volunteering at a local community center, helping single mothers. Slowly, the woman who had once measured happiness by luxury began to find it instead in purpose. Jack watched her transformation, at first skeptical, then cautiously hopeful. And as he saw her change, something in him softened too. We started new traditions. Sunday dinners. Sometimes just the three of us, sometimes with friends Jack brought home. No more reserved tables at expensive restaurants. Just home-cooked meals, laughter, and conversation. In those moments, I saw glimpses of a future I hadn't dared dream. A family, not defined by divorce papers or financial settlements, but by shared respect and hard-earned forgiveness. Yet, the scars remained. There were days Jack's words from that birthday dinner echoed in my mind. At least Mom's new husband isn't a loser like you. There were nights Linda woke from nightmares, whispering Brad's name with dread before catching herself. Healing wasn't a straight line. It zigzagged through guilt, regret, and forgiveness. One spring afternoon, Jack and I took a walk through the neighborhood park. The trees were blossoming, and the air smelled of fresh rain. "Dad," he began, hesitating, "I've been thinking, after grad school, I want to work with you." The word stunned me. "With me? At the company?" He nodded, "Not because it's easy, because I've seen what you built. Quietly, honestly, I want to learn that." In that moment, every painful step of the journey felt worth it. A few weeks later, Linda asked if we could talk, alone. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Marcus," she began, "I don't think I ever really thanked you." "For what?" I asked. "For loving Jack, even when he turned against you. For not turning him against me. For never saying, 'I told you so' about Brad." I took a deep breath. "Linda, the truth is I was angry. Furious, even. But anger never built anything worth keeping." She looked away, her eyes damp. "I've been so afraid you'd hate me forever." "I did," I admitted softly, "for a while. But hate is heavy, and we have Jack. That matters more." She reached out, and for the first time in years we held hands, not as lovers, but as two people bound by something deeper than romance. Shared history, shared mistakes, and shared hope for our son. 1 year later, Jack's birthday arrived. This time, he insisted on something small. Dinner at my house, just the three of us. I cooked. The table wasn't lavish. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, a simple salad, and Jack's favorite chocolate cake. Before we ate, Jack raised his glass. "I want to say something," he began. "Last year, I said some things I regret. Things that hurt you, Dad, and Mom. Tonight, I want to thank you both for not giving up on me or each other. I'm proud to be your son." His voice cracked, and for a moment, none of us spoke. Then Linda leaned over and hugged him. I joined, and for the first time in so long, we felt whole. Not perfect, but whole. Quiet victories and new dreams. Business grew steadily. Jack joined the company, starting at the bottom by his own choice. He wanted to earn respect, not inherit it. Watching him in meetings, asking thoughtful questions, offering ideas, it was like seeing a seed finally sprout after years underground. Linda, too, found her calling. She launched workshops for women rebuilding their lives after divorce. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. One evening, after she finished a workshop, she called me. "I finally get it," she said. "Why you live the way you did. Quietly, with integrity." "I'm glad," I replied. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," she added softly. The words meant more than I expected. Years passed. Jack graduated, took on more responsibility, and eventually became my partner. Linda and I remained close friends. The love we shared had changed shape, less like fire, more like steady sunlight. One autumn morning, I stood in front of the mirror and hardly recognized a man staring back. Older, grayer, but somehow lighter. The weight of proving myself, of hiding my worth, of carrying silent resentment. It was gone. I thought about that dinner years ago, when Jack's words felt like knives. I realize now, that night was an end. It was a beginning, a moment that forced me to face who I really was, and who I wanted to be. As I write this, Jack has children of his own. They know me as Grandpa Marcus. They don't care what car I drive or what house I live in. They care that I show up, that I tell stories, that I love them. Linda visits often, still bringing too much dessert. Sometimes, late at night, Jack and I sit quietly, remembering. "Do you regret it?" he asked once. "Not showing off what you had?" I shook my head. No, because what I built wasn't for show. It was for you, and you found your way back. That's worth everything. In the end, wealth fades. Houses age. Cars rust. What lasts are the moments when you choose love over pride, forgiveness over anger, presence over appearance. The boy who once called me a loser now calls me dad, with respect and love. The woman who once dismissed me now thanks me, not for what I gave, but for who I was. And me? I found peace not in proving them wrong, but in staying true to who I've always been. Quiet, steady, present. That, I realize, is my legacy. And it's enough.